Hello and welcome to BharatShakti.in. I'm Brigadier Chatterjee, editor BharatShakti.in. We're going to be talking about Ukraine. Ukraine, in fact, is in the news all over for the last couple of days. But we will be limiting ourselves primarily to the military aspects and refer to geopolitics only when it is required. So, for that kind of a discussion, I have with me today Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar. Lieutenant General Shankar is a retired Director General of Artillery. He's also a professor currently with the IIT Madras. Welcome to the show, General.
Thanks a lot, sir. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you, and it's a great thing to be back with BharatShakti.in.
Well, thank you, General Shankar, to start the proceedings of our business today. Before we get on to the military operations per se, what I want to discuss a little bit with you is the hybrid warfare, the cyber warfare, and the information warfare campaigns, some run by Russians and some perhaps run by Western powers. So if we could discuss that a little bit first, and then we'll get on to all the operations per se.
Sure, sir. We'll start with information operations because that has dominated this war. The Americans ran a great information cum intelligence operation where they started tracking every move of the Russian right from about 15-20 days before the actual, that is 24th February when the kinetic operation started. And they kept telling everyone, look, this is what is happening. And they kept second guessing what Russia is going to do. Many people believed it. In fact, many people didn't believe it. A few believed it, but that we'll touch upon later. So they ran a very sophisticated information and intelligence campaign. On the other hand, the Russians also played a very smart information and intelligence campaign. As part of their information intelligence campaign, they gathered all the information about the dispositions of Ukraine. And as part of their information campaign, they put out a whole lot of misinformation to gain, to keep everyone guessing as to when they're actually going in. And the time when they went in and from the direction in which they went in the multi-pronged manner was a bit of a surprise to everyone. So it was a very sophisticated operation. The Ukrainians, it appears, have benefited from the information of the Americans. So we'll talk about that later. Now let's talk about cyber war, cyber operations. Both sides have indulged heavily in cyber operations. But what has come out is, and this is something which I read as a part of an analysis, cyber war is a great gray zone operations tool. It's cheap. It's not traceable. You can do what you want, but you can't actually go to war because of a cyber attack. And these cyber attacks are very good during peacetime and during gray zone time on hybrid situations. But when it comes to actual war, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of cyber war affecting the outcomes on ground, whether it's a violent outcome or otherwise. So that has gone. Maybe there might be some slowing down. Maybe there's some cause and effect which we don't know, which will come out. So to that extent, I think all of us have to rethink about this business of cyber war and its applicability actually in kinetic battle, right? But otherwise, cyber war has this thing. And as far as hybrid is concerned, you're looking at a new paradigm where Russia has gone in with hard power, conventional, with a lot of force multipliers, right? Whereas Ukraine has taken the hybrid route. They've gone the hybrid route because they're a smaller army and they've had to react rather than be proactive. But in this, I would also say that the Ukrainians have been smart because, well, like I said, they've used the information and intelligence given by Americans to work out a very clear defensive strategy, right? I think that's a great thing they've done. So this is my view about the hybrid and information and cyber ops. Any questions, sir?
You're right on the nail, but let me just give you some ideas that I have from whatever I read.
Yeah, please.
And see, as far as hybrid is concerned, what I would say one of the things that the Russians have done is, you see, gone for those two objectives in the hybrid warfare, which are very common. One is that if there are certain, let's say, cracks in the society, if there are certain rifts amongst within the populace in a particular country, you try and see that this gap increases. So they have done that, and by separating the Russian origin Ukrainian people from otherwise Ukrainians, they have tried to create that kind of a gap over there.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They
They've
have
done it
tried
over a long time.
Yeah, they've been doing it for some time now. And they have also tried to put across the idea that the Ukraine state, the Ukraine president is actually a nobody. He is a very weak man, that kind of a projection, that he was a clown to start his
Yeah.
career in movies. And though, of course, he later on became a pretty good businessman, successful businessman. That part was not there in the hybrid war. So that's that. And I have some reports which say, as far as cyber is concerned, that just before the attack, 24th, it all started. On 23rd, there were attacks on government civilian digital targets over there. That includes the part of the electricity system, etc., but which did not create the kind of havoc. What is more important perhaps is the fact that the cyber has not been used to that extent. I agree with you that the effect is also not much, but I feel it could have been used to a greater extent by perhaps the Russians. They didn't do so maybe because they
But that
thought
there's a reason, sir. Unless militaries are networked, you can't use cyber. So I don't know
militarily
whether,
agreed.
militarily, cyber has not paid off that kind of dividends as in gray zone types.
I absolutely agreed. Militarily, it has paid off no dividends because they are not so well evolved, like you've said yourself. But they tried some
Yeah,
targets
they
at
have.
least with whatever limited success that they had.
Yes, yes.
So anyway, that is that information warfare. Whatever you said, I quite agree with you that it was a very, very sophisticated information warfare from both sides, and both sides, I think, gained certain amount of mileage out of it. And like
Yes,
you
yes.
said, one used the intelligence of the other used the information of third party, and that's how they built up their thing. Right? We'll leave it at that, General, unless you want to talk some more about it
No, no.
and get on with the thrust lines. If you can explain to us now which were the thrust lines worked out by the Russians and how have they moved? Where are they now?
So fundamentally, on 24th, they used firepower in an integrated manner, air and ground-based firepower, to strike all over and open up the battlefield. And they fired in depth. They used long-range vectors, and and then they commenced their ground operations. Initially, one felt that they're going to Odisha, Kherson, that is from Crimea up north, in the Donbass area, Kharkiv, and down from Belarus down to Kyiv. But later, as the day progressed, and say 25th, 26th February, it emerged that the Russians were operating on three thrust lines. One thrust line coming down from Belarus down to Kyiv. The second thrust line coming from Belgorod down to east to the Kharkiv area. The third thrust line was from Crimea up to Kherson, Mariupol area. I won't say the fourth thrust line, but they did do something to assist the Russian-held territories in the Donbass area. Basically, three thrust lines. And these three thrust lines, I mean, my own view is that they were too far apart and their objectives were different. And in the end, if you see their political aim and objective, as it is now coming out, and it was also guessed by everyone, was to replace the government in Kyiv. That they've not been able to do with these three thrust lines because the three thrust lines were dissipated, not in mutual support. For each of the three thrust lines, it's very clear that the Russians have had to do corridor protection, which they've not been able to do fully. That's why the whole thing got delayed. All the three thrust lines have got bogged down initial, right? Now they're reinforcing it. That's a different story. We'll come to that. So as a result, the main political objective of toppling the government is lost. It's not yet happened, right? One. Number two is that in these thrust lines, after the initial air strikes, they didn't follow it up with air strikes. They used only ground strikes. That gave a window of opportunity to the Ukrainians to use their own air force and their own strikes and slow down the whole thing. So if you look at it at the end of the first cycle, which is on say 27th, 28th evening, the Russians were still short of their objectives. None of their objectives had been reached, and now they're reinforcing them and going hell for leather and hammer and tongs at Kyiv. That's my view. If we have any questions and you have any views, we can exchange them.
Right, Shankar, I'll just quote you from one photograph that I saw in amongst many that are there in the press, and that was that photograph was a part of a convoy which is supposed to have been 67 kilometers long,
Yeah,
and 64 kilometers long, and it is going towards Kyiv, and it was a Russian convoy which is going towards Kyiv that I'm talking about. I felt that the whole battle, that it was an administrative move. It was not like moving through the enemy territory with 67 kilometers of vehicles. If there was some amount of, let's say, long-range artillery with the Ukrainians, which is there with them, with those March rockets, etc., if that was utilized well, perhaps there would have been a disaster for this particular column, which is going from Kharkiv towards Kiev.
actually, what you said is right, sir. When in the initial stages, I read what the Ukrainians did was they knew that the Russians, from the hint which the Americans gave them, they knew where the Russians are going to come, and they designated ambush sites by fire ambush, pre-designated killing sites, which they kept under observation by drones and CCTV, etc., etc. They used Smirch rocket systems in some height, which could affect many of these killing areas. And when the initial convoys came, they fired and damaged. That's how they could slow down the advancing Russian columns in the initial phases. This column, which you're saying, that 64-kilometer long column, which is whether administrative or it is reinforcements, we don't know, but they're coming up. That has not been interfered with. What does it tell you? It tells you either the Ukrainians don't have the wherewithal to reach there, or they run out of ammunition, or they've been physically, they're not able to go to those deployment areas to fire.
Or they try to draw them in.
Yeah, they're trying to draw them in, maybe. Maybe they're trying to draw them in and get them into Kyiv and sort them out there. Maybe the Ukrainians have changed their tactics completely. Right? So we'll see how it goes, because I wouldn't like to second guess why they couldn't do it. But having said that, for the past 24 to 48 hours, I've been hearing that there's this convoy moving from, Belarus border to Kyiv, and it is still not reached. So there's something happening there, and either they're getting broken down, or their logistics problems, or they're getting sniped in between, and that's not coming out. That information, when it comes out, it'll be interesting to see why this great python couldn't come down to Kyiv.
Okay. Right. Let me take off from what you've said, that, well, you have tried to suggest that maybe the Ukrainians were also able to stop them by interfering, whether by sniping or whether by using this much, or whichever way. But I expected a lot more from an army which is more than 2.5 lakhs strong, and which is being armed every other day by some kind of weapons coming in. Of course, those weapons can't be absorbed at this point in time in the war. But then they have been having better relations with both the EU and the Americans for quite some time. So how has this army performed, in your opinion? Has it performed well?
I think the Ukrainian army has performed far better than the Russian army. Look, let's put it this way. Russia has put in so much, but in the execution, they've... Okay, now I have to take you back a little. You go back in time, in 2008, when there was a problem between Ossetia and Georgia, Russia intervened on the side of Ossetia and defeated Georgia. It was a very surgical operation, a lot of force, everything. Second, when in 2014, when they went to Crimea, they did the same thing. They put in a lot of force, and the Ukrainians just stood by and nothing happened. And they took over Crimea. And then ever since then, they've been arming the Donbas area Russians, and they've been creating problems for Ukrainians, and they could do nothing. I think this became a matrix, template for Russia to operate. I think Russia thought that if we come with a lot of force, do a lot of firing, everything, Ukraine will give way. And they've templated. That's the way I read it, right? And I've written about it. So they've templated, and then suddenly they found that the Ukrainians were reacting, because earlier probably Ukrainians didn't have the information in which the Americans this time gave them, and Ukrainians probably had a plan which they didn't publicize. They appeared something and they've done something else to slow down. You see, the whole thing is Ukrainian army is small. They obviously can't overpower the Russian army, which is heavy on strength, qualitatively and quantitatively, right? All they can do is slow down, slow down, slow down, and get them into some kind of a stalemate, which is a victory. Even forget stalemate. Even if they slow down the Russian army and show them down, it's a victory. Now that has revved up the whole Ukrainian system, politically, militarily. Now that has also made, like you rightly said, the president was able to revive the morale of the people, President Zelensky. As a result, he's also reached out to EU. EU is giving the stake. Now, the Russia is in a state where even if it now gets hold of Kyiv, the whole situation is going to go into an insurgency situation and a hybrid situation. Once it goes into a hybrid situation, it's anybody's game.
Right. Thanks, Shankar. I think that's very well explained. And I would say, in addition to the Russians, giving out a lot of information, and a lot of information came out, of course, from American intelligence sources, that 190,000 people, they use info warfare to show their Putin as a very strong, and as tall as a phantom, and the Russian army very strong and no match. The Ukrainians will be no match, and that's why perhaps initially they could move a little bit, but their logistics, if nothing else, their logistics have possibly stopped them.
There's one more point, which I'd like to make, before we this thing. If you see today, any news channel you take across the board, the narrative is of the West and the Ukrainians. The Russian narrative is not coming through. It is not as if the Russians don't have a narrative. They have a good narrative. They have a good basis for why all this has happened. It is not as if they are full at fault. There's a lot of fault with the NATO for having brought the situation to this head. But that narrative is gone. And the narrative of the West, the NATO, EU, US, and Ukraine is now dominant. So this is something which we'll have to see how it plays out in the future.
So obviously, in the information space, the Russians have lost out. The Americans have gained in the information space.
Yeah. Now at this point of time, the Russians are fighting against the information, what shall I say, deluge which is coming on them.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go a little further. What is the end state that Putin has in mind, exactly as you feel it? Is he looking for just...
I'll put it, yes, sir. I think it's a very valid point. What is the end state? From the beginning, the end state which Putin probably wanted was, have control over Ukraine, one way or the other, either via proxy government there, or hive off one part of Ukraine and amalgamate it with, Russia, so that he keeps NATO far away from his doorstep, and his Russian sphere of influence is intact. Last month, I had written an article to say, look, you look at Russia, they have done whatever they want to keep their neighborhood intact. In fact, we should also do that. I mean, we should also take a leaf out of the Russian book and be a little proactive in our neighborhood so that no one comes into our neighborhood. That's what he's done. To do that, he's come to a stage where he felt that the current government of Ukraine, if it continues, he'll not have that influence. Right? So they're now trying to put in the earlier president, Yanukovych, back into thing. I believe he's in Belarus already. If Russia succeeds in doing whatever they want, they'll topple the government and put a puppet government, and then control Ukraine and get it into their sphere of influence. But that, at this point of time, let's see how it pans out.
If what you say works out, Jan Shankar, in that case, actually speaking, what the Americans wanted would happen ultimately, and that is there will be an insurgency on over there.
Yes, sir. It's not going. This situation is such that I don't see a clean end to it. It's going to be a long drawn affair. is going to, whichever way you take it. And if Russia suffers a setback, don't be surprised if Putin raises the stakes and again starts waving the nuclear card. He's already done it twice.
That was a little childish, I thought.
Yeah.
For a man
Well,
of
that
Putin's
whatever
nature.
it is, but he's done it.
Now he's done it.
He has done it. And if he suffers a reverse, I wouldn't be surprised if he does it again. So we are actually, I mean, my way of looking at it, the next 48 to 72 hours are critical. It will tell which direction things are going to go and how things are, what is the exit route for each actor in this drama. It is not only for Russia. There's an exit route required for EU. There's an exit route required for Ukrainians. There's an exit route required for NATO. There's an exit route required for USA.
Definitely. A lot of stakes out there. One more question.
Sir.
One more question, General Shankar, and that's actually not related to all the military planning that we're talking about, but it's there in the news a lot. And I thought since we both are talking across this web connection, we might as well talk about it also. And that's about our students our students being evacuated, perhaps a little late in the day. There's a lot of noise in the press. What do you feel about it? Why are we a little late in reacting to getting our students out?
I don't think so, sir, because who knew that there's going to be a war and it will flare up like this? From some reports which I see, even on 24th, people were loafing around and doing shopping there in Kyiv and Kharkiv. Right? Ukrainians themselves didn't believe that it will come to such a head. And in the event, I think we are doing far better than many. In fact, I've read reports that China is probably 72 hours behind us. We've got this experience of evacuating people from all over, including Wuhan, Yemen, and Gulf earlier, and so we probably are in slightly a better shape in this thing. Under the conditions, I think the government is doing a damn good job. We can't. The tricky part is in Kharkiv in the east, where things have gone a little bad, and that's where the maximum student population is there. How to bring them out is an issue. I already see our government has approached the Russian government to see how to get these boys and girls out from there. We wish them all the best.
Well, I think that's one of the best things to have done, that approach the Russian government also, because in Kharkiv they will possibly or are possibly the part today.
Yeah, because if the Russian government agrees, then you can, instead of evacuating them westwards, you evacuate them eastwards to Belgorod and get them out.
Definitely, options increase.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, General. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for sparing the time for us.
Thanks a lot, sir. It's been a pleasure. And in this time, I think we need to exchange our views so that the public at large comes to know what's happening.
Right. And thanks, viewers. Thanks for logging on, and do log on now and then, and you'll find such interesting stories on bharatshakti.in.